aside from the historical aspect of Fells Point, the combination of groups that are living there together, the vitality of artist groups, of various recent immigrant populations, first and second generation groups from Eastern Europe, the people who are restoring houses, the industry, the working population. It's an extremely vital area. We see it we see it in several roles. One, to preserve what is good there. Two, is to attract other people there, because the city is concerned that it attract middle-class people to the city, people who have a choice as to where they're going to live and pay more in taxes than they cost in services, and places like Fells Point have a tremendous potential. We are very proud of our public market system in the city. It's unique in the United States, and we want that market rehabilitated and restored. Loose Sour is being, we persuaded the people that are involved with the markets to retain Loose Sour, to design what the new or the renovated market will look like. We had a community committee interview about 10 firms who we selected from around the country who we thought had the characteristics that they would want and we would want, and then went down to the community and had a vote. So he was really selected by the community after this process. As commissioner of the city's Department of Housing and Community Development, and also being responsible for the expressway, there is somewhat of a conflict in that dual assignment. In fact, the reason I was assigned expressway responsibility is because of my anti-expressway or skepticism about expressways and my desire to try to minimize the negative impact as much as possible. Now, whether the road's going to be built at all or not has to be decided. There has to be hearings and it has to be discussed with the community and so forth. But if it is built, the route that seems to hold the greatest promise would go under Fells Point and not a surface road or an elevated road. So that if you're in Fells Point 5 years from now, you wouldn't know there's an expressway there, but you would know there's a lot less traffic on the streets.
Take it. No, you hold it. Oh, take it. Hi, how are you? Look at these yellow shirts.
Quanti anni fa la festa?
No.
Quanti è festa?
Le professor from
Quanti 2 e 3 feste? Quanti?
Quanti? Non le capisci.
When your tummy comes in, give me 2 boxes of scrapple. That's right. How much more? 15 pounds of scrapple. How much is that bag? You got it all about hands, taking everything.
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 2 lunch rolls enough for you?
The Polish ethnic community around the St. Stanislav's area is quite different than the renters over in the property here on Shakespeare Street. Quite different in turn from the merchants on Fleet Street. Merchants on Fleet Street don't really talk to the merchants on Broadway. The merchants on Broadway on the west side of the street don't talk to the merchants on the east side of the street, and neither of them talk to the merchants in the market structures, and the market structures don't talk to anybody else. The North Market people don't talk to the South Market people. So there's a very fine-grained sense of communities, right, within the broader Fells Point planning area. In one of the meetings in the community organization, I said that it was impossible for me to really continue working with individual organizations, and that what was needed was an organization that could act for the whole community. So what individuals then did in the community is they decided that what was needed was a planning council. And it was then decided that for the planning council to be truly representative of as many people in the community, it should be made up, its primary membership, the voting membership, would be made up of representatives of all these separate organizations. The Fells Point area has a history. It's the place where the clipper ships were made. It was very early settled. It has a very long maritime tradition. There are very few places in the country that have the characteristics of a working waterfront, tugboats coming and going, major freighters stopped right at the end of the large public space here, and right next to it, very small houses. They have bars that are completely different in characteristic. In the neighborhood area, there are small neighborhood bars that cater to the people who live in the area, as well as to the people who are working in the waterfront there. The other bars are located on Broadway that are bringing in people from the major metropolitan areas, far away as from Philadelphia and from Washington, D.C. On Fridays, Saturdays, nights, the place is jumping. Good but bad also, because the people who are brought in often don't have much respect for the residential community and things that go on that is a little difficult to live with. The original problem of the road, which is I-83, the highway, you must understand, came right through the heart of the community here. And it's left in its path, although the road is not scheduled to go through here now. The city thought that the road was going to be built, and through here is a line of condemned properties that the city has purchased. And many of them are derelicts, and the community has been attempting to get these properties rehabitated by people. The test of it will be on if, in fact, the construction is not going to provide the negative impacts. Like the last thing the community could have is dirt all over the streets, the messes of the streets. It would put businesses out of business, obviously. And the next thing is, how can the community be assured that a double-level tunnel, quite deep, going through it is not going to, through vibration or noise, disturb the existing buildings? If I think the highway people could prove this to the community, there might be a way out to put a highway into the community here. And I think it's up to the highway people to make their case of it to the community themselves.
Oh, yeah, the neighborhood is changed too. I used to be this back with most mostly Polish neighborhood. Yeah, those timers. Yeah. Now you only mostly got widows here living, while the whole neighborhood changed to Cubans, Puerto Ricans, and Spanish people coming in. Every couple of weeks or so, you see new faces. Many of them die out, and the younger generation to move in the suburbs. And then if the parents are still living, well, they move out with parents move with the children. Oleszczuk, O-L-E-S-Z-C-Z-U-K. In school they couldn't pronounce it, so they call me Ollie. So I call the place Ollie.
if there is a group of people that represent some particular point of view or interest in the neighborhood, then the point is for them to put themselves together, get together, however formally or informally they wish to do it, and inform the council that they do exist as a group, that they represent a certain body of people for whatever reason, and simply appear at the council meeting and name one of themselves as their representative or voting person on the council, and the council recognizes that, approves it, and accepts that new member. And our feeling is that this thing cannot be a success without the broadest possible representation and participation from the community.
I don't think we're interested in making parking lots. I don't think we're interested in building big industries in or anything like that. I think we're interested in the same thing as Fells Point has been interested in remodeling. But yet, in the same sense, we have a feeling that we don't want to be GM at this. And especially, there has to have an ordinance and have an overseer over what we've already had for the last 50 years. We've had zoning boards and permit department boards, or whatever you have. You get your building, your zoning board, you have the zoning. All this area is zoned, and I don't think you'll ever get it rezoned.
This planning council is to deal with zoning as it exists and should be changed in order to make of the community what the community itself wants it to be.
Most everybody comes here. He can mix you up any kind of racing feed you want, and it has a lot to do, your condition of your pigeon, and it means a lot, just like an athlete. He's got to be in shape to compete. You can see the different kinds of medicines, roost paints, terramycin, gallomycin, aeromycin, NFZ solution. All these different things help keep your pigeon in condition. You can buy them anywhere from $2, and I think the highest pigeon ever sold was a pigeon in Europe called Workman. He sold for $10,000. And I think the next highest to that I know of is Scout. I think he was $8,500. Like I'd say the average guy might spend $15 to $20 for a pigeon, but not over that, you know. And then he don't buy that many. One or two goings, and he tries to improve his blood.
Years ago, this was Sailor Town when my father and mother first came here. And they ran the bar from 6 in the morning until midnight. Those were the hours. And they had free lunch on the counters in those days for a nickel beer. You could stay and have your lunch. And of course now it's a whole new thing because it's been declared a historic area and we have different people coming here now. We have a very nice group of young people that have moved here and are my customers, for which I'm very thankful. Plus the old residents like Earhart and stevedores and a few old sailors. But most of the sailors that I knew and my father and mother knew have retired or are dead, so this is a whole new thing down here now.
Long time before I've been on Cameron Line. I lived in San Francisco in 1921. I would even know something about the Barbary Coast. It was still Just about the end of the Barbary coast out there.
How about those burlesque shows out there?
Didn't have, oh, that's, yeah. Old time, what, I forget the name of that, vaudeville outfit that was out there, and that was very famous. I forget the name. I can't remember names very good. I was in Hamburg, I was known for it. They have no such thing around here. I wish they had. I was getting a phone call to call up somebody.
You keep calling those girls all the time. I know what you do all the time.
There were a lot of pretty girls over there in them days, believe me.
Our company is what we call a terminal operating company. We own our own terminals. We're active in stevedoring, warehousing, bagging, fumigation, custom house brokering, forwarding, most anything. Rucker Terminals was started in 1921 by my dad on a loan of $800. Captain Rucker worked as a clerk for a terminal warehouse at the foot of Bond Street up until 1917. He was a stock clerk and also helped out in the warehouse. The two buildings that we're going to set aside as a museum were built in 1822 by James Byes. The building has been in continuous use since 1822 up to the present time. We're now turning one of the original buildings over to what we call a working man's museum, which will show the methods and the materials that were handled back during the early days, starting in 1760 up to the turn of the century. We have documents signed by Edward Fell. We have documents signed by Anne Bond Fell. We have purchase orders on a schooner that was to be built in Fells Point. A number of these old documents will be exhibited in the museum, and the balance will be donated to the Fells Point Historical Society.
Because of the scare that the city fathers and the interstate committee made here in Fells Point, the majority of the Polish people have left their homes, and although they still belong to the parish, but they do not live in this vicinity. They live either with their sons or daughters, or they have apartments in other parts of Fells Point. Majority of the people, I would say 99%, even better, of the people in Fells Point want the road to go under the water, if it's going to be a tunnel road. Interstate cannot guarantee the people anything here. For instance, they're planning on going 60 feet underground. What's going to happen to the foundations of the buildings? There's going to be vibrations. If it's going to be a double-tier road, one up above, or I should say they're both going to be underground, but one's going to be lower going east and the other one's going to be west, a three-way or a three-lane road. And the people are against it because they don't know what's going to happen. And I'm concerned about the parking on Sunday. They told me that the dirt will be taken out, and I am sure that they can't be kidding me. I'm not from the kindergarten, that they're going to have a truck behind the digger or the backhoe and to take that dirt off, because the dirt is going to be laying around. In the vicinity of the church, there are 54 bars here. 54 bars in Fells Point. Now, these are not neighborhood bars. The neighborhood bars are good. Those that have been here for years, they are good bars. Like, for instance, Zeppi's, Pete's. we have Walshaletsky's. They're all good bars. But the ones that came in recently, this all college kids that come in from somewhere else to let their hair down. And you should see, for instance, Friday, Saturday night, if we had church services, you wouldn't be able to get a parking place in front of the church.
A couple people I know have snuck in on some when the city houses were condemned and gone in there and lived. Little by little, you know, after the city condemned the buildings, people would go to the city and say, well, how about if I just rented it for, you know, a few months until you decided to tear it down? And they all got them for about $50 a month. Some of them got it for no rent if they promised to bring it up to code. So that's really what's happening in terms of a living situation down here. Now there's a fight between whether they should have the house or whether it should go back to the original owners of the house if you know, the neighborhood isn't going to be condemned, and that became a real big conflict. Whether the city was going to sell them the house or whether they were going to take it and do something else with it, and I gather that issue is still up in the air. No one's heard anything firm from the city. And artists are, even if they're working as teachers, don't make a lot of money. You know, don't make enough money to be able to afford the places once they've been renovated to the point where property taxes goes up and property values go up. They seem to have to go out and find somewhere else.
We were very interested in the idea of 18th century houses with a view of the water. On the harbor, we first went to Federal Hill, then we came down here and found that we could get a house which was a very early house. It's called the Merchant's House on Thames Street, which was for sale. We thought we were very, very lucky, and we put a deposit down on the house, and in a couple of days, talking to a resident, found that the entire block was slated for the interstate expressway. I believe at that time it was 8 or 10 lanes. It would have wiped out the entire center block of Thames Street all the way to Lancaster. And determined at that time that I would do what I could to save it. That was 10 years ago this month. You know, we're still working on it. It's going to be difficult to retain the diversity of the neighborhood as it has been, and I think is what gives it a great deal of value. It's not a Georgetown and it's not a Williamsburg, and you know, we don't want it to be. This house was one that I bought myself after we'd been down here working for a couple of years. It's one that I always was hoping that I could buy because it was not only an early house but had a wonderful view of the harbor. It was a 18th century house built by a ship's captain named Captain Pitt, and one of the fine houses down here. Probably the finest is the Captain Steele House, which is also on Fell Street, which my brother and I bought and later sold to a doctor and his wife who are restoring it. This house is about the same period. It's had its roof raised, as many of the houses in Fells Point did during the Victorian times, so that without the pitched roof, it doesn't look quite as early as it is. We restored the second floor and the first floor and have tenants living in apartments which have all of the original work restored, and the details are very fine. The rooms are very well proportioned. The man who built this house probably had ship's carpenters who did a lot of the woodwork. In one of the rooms downstairs, the cupboards and the drawers under the cupboards are very reminiscent of work on board ship.
After I married, then I bought this house in '46. And things have changed in this house. And as I say, the neighborhood used to be called Polish Utah Place. People kept it very clean, and the neighbors were very congenial. We got along with everybody. I'm here such a long time, I've never had any trouble. Now we have this, we used to have a fire department across the street, which we enjoyed very much. The firemen were very pleasant, and we always got along with them, cheerful. Today they have this recreation center, and things have changed. A lot of noise, and lots of time the children, when they come out, even the grown-up boys, they carry on too much. Well, I remember when the pier was built, and I remember when I went to number 6 school, right down the street, when they were digging the waterfront, digging it in, you know, making it larger, the water. The ground, and I remember when they dug up 3 cannons. They must have been from the Civil War because they were real rusty. And I remember when they got them out, they put them on a barge. Well, I've lived in this block for over 50 years. I like it because I'm used to the neighborhood. When you're born and raised here, and I'm close to the bank, I'm close to Broadway, I'm not too far from the market. That church is right around the corner, so that's why I like it.
Well, actually, I came to Fells Point in 1968. I was living with a group of artists, and they renovated the whole block that we were all living on. We were going to the Maryland Institute, and so we came looking in Fells Point for a cheap place that would hold about 13 of us. And fortunately, we found one, the Hollywood Bakery, which is now Beef and Beer. And it was 27 rooms, so we all had our own bedrooms, studios, and we lived there for about 3 years. And we had a big show, the Hollywood Bakery show in Cross Keys. And we got publicity in the paper from it, and the city somehow got a hold of the newspaper and saw that we were living in this building and discovered in their records that the building had been condemned 3 years before that. And so we were forced to leave because they came and condemned the building again. The reason I'm doing this drawing is because I'm a big fan of Blaze Starr. I've just read her book. I've never seen her act, but I've just read her book and I was really impressed. Actually, it wasn't any literary spectacular or anything, but I have a lot of respect for someone who's raised in an atmosphere where there's almost no education, who can come out of an atmosphere like that and become a big entertainer like Blaze Starr has become. I think the main thing was the bars, I think, were the main thing that stopped the road from coming through, because they drew so much crowds and brought so much attention, along with the antique stores and the festivals and just the neighborhood people all getting out and getting together, and I think that's what really stopped the road from coming through. I saw the space up here and decided to rent it. For one thing, it consolidated everything that I was doing, And the lighting was great. It's a big area. It's good for parties. And I have a lot of fun with it, and you know, I can get a lot of work done here, so I can have my solitude when I want it, and plus I can have mass of people when I like to entertain people and throw big parties. And, I've been in Fells Point for about 8 years now. I just feel secure here. Every time I leave the neighborhood and go somewhere else, I start feeling insecure and have to get back to my home ground, which is Fells Point.
This logbook has, you can hardly see it, but it has a Eson illustrated on it. And that's not the earliest one. This has a Eson on the fly leaf. He seemed to, either whether he encouraged his sailors to artwork or not, I don't know, but there's a lot of artwork through all of his books, and the bills for it are still existing, the bills that it cost to build it and paint it and make the sails and so forth. And he sailed in this about 5 years before he sold it. It was built in 1820. And it's an example of the fast Baltimore clipper. This is a miniature of Henry in his city clothes. That was in his captain's clothes, sailing clothes. And this is his wife, Mary Leake. She went in 1800. She went on the ship Venus with him on one of his trips, and she took care of his business affairs. And this is one of his daughters, Mary DeShiel Robinson Forrest.
Well, we've been fighting this road for about 10 years now, and we thought the road was going to go out into the river, but it seems like it's back on Alisane and Fleet Street again now, and I guess we're going to have to start a fight all over again.
I can't understand how the city could even think about doing such a thing. I mean, they've had so much fight and so much flack from what they have done in neighborhoods and displacing people. And like in Canton, they had were responsible really for a great many old people being killed because old people can't be moved out of their homes. And they're right back here on Alisane, they talk about this slurry wall construction, but they tell you in the same breath that when your foundations shake, that they'll fix them for you, which isn't going to help you much if your house falls down.
Mr. Sauer really doesn't give an opinion because he really can't, because he has to get his opinion from the people in the community. It's sort of like a small town. Everybody cares about everybody else. They help everybody else. You don't find this in the rest of the city.
And it's a nice mix. People of different economic incomes live together and get along together, and it's an interesting tradition that's kept on from the time Fells Point began to grow.